The criticism of the president had been building, and NBC News captured the media zeitgeist with this story. Trump becomes first president since 2002 not to visit troops at Christmas time. But that was, well, a bit premature. Just hours later, we learned that President and Melania Trump were already in Iraq, where the commander-in-chief spoke to the troops.
America shouldn't be doing the fighting for every nation on earth, not being reimbursed in many cases at all. So we're not the suckers of the world. We're no longer the suckers, folks.
But his speech triggered headlines such as this one in the New York Times. Trump Iraq visit is called a political rally. Joining us now to analyze the coverage, Gail Trotter, a commentator and host of the podcast Right in D.C. Beverly Hallberg, president of District Media D.C. and a contributor to The Hill and Washington Examiner. And Richard Fowler, radio talk show host and Fox News contributor. Gail Trotter, we've heard a whole lot of yes, but in the media. Yes, it's good he went to Iraq, but he should have gone sooner. Yes, but he should have stayed longer. Yes, but he shouldn't have talked about domestic politics or border security. Your thoughts?
Right. Well, you saw the tweet by NBC News saying that President Trump had not gone to a war zone. And that was about almost the same time as Air Force One was touching down in Iraq.
Which nobody knew at the time.
No, correct. But then as soon as that happened, they started nitpicking every part of the visit. The campaign paraphernalia being signed, the interactions that President Trump had with a Navy SEAL team, what Melania Trump was wearing at the visit to the soldiers in Iraq.
Definitely a major part of the story, that one.
Right. They're not going to let that escape. But Melania was the first woman to first lady to visit Iraq. Her predecessor never went to a war zone. And we should see glowing reviews about that the bravery of her going to a war zone, even when she's the mother of a small child.
Beverly Hallberg, does some of this carping, fair or unfair, depending on the details, fuel the sense among Trump supporters that their guy can't buy a good headline just about no matter what he does?
I think the coverage of this is proof that Donald Trump, when he says that the news is fake news, it actually works in his favor. I was even surprised when I shouldn't say surprised, but when I saw the Washington Post, their article and their coverage of this, they didn't get into the who, the how, the when. They actually started by saying this whole visit was shrouded in secrecy and that there had been so much turmoil in the administration this past week.
Secrecy for security reasons, for every president.
And so what we're seeing is reporters actually, when they're supposed to be fair, straight journalists, turning this into opinion journalists. Is there a place to give context after you lay out the facts? Absolutely. But when most of the stories, the first paragraph, the second paragraph, is all about their opinion, it does play to Trump's base who say he's been right all along. This is fake news and he can't get a fair shake.
Richard Fowler, the president does open himself up to media criticism, does he not, when he declares on that trip, I've given the military the first raise in 10 years, which is not true, and that the raise is 10%, which is also not true.
Yeah, I mean, I think the president does open himself up to media criticism. For over the past 2 years, you've got to give this president credit for the fact that he's been able to manipulate the media to his benefit.
So you found something nice to say about it.
I know, I did. But here's the thing. Next week, the ball game changes. With Nancy Pelosi as the new Speaker of the House, she also somebody who knows how to play the media to her advantage, as she did in the December 11th meeting with the president. So now, not only he has to deal with the media, he's going to have to figure out a way to deal with Nancy Pelosi, and that's going to be his biggest challenge in the next year.
The media are going to have to figure out how to deal with the House Democrats now that they have some power. So, Gail, you mentioned paraphernalia. So while he was in Iraq, and we have some video of this, the president signed some Make America Great hats for the troops, and that brought plenty of media criticism about him undermining the independence of the military. Go ahead. Go ahead. There's no sound.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because if you want to look at what's political, in my view, the media coverage of this visit is political, not the president. We had the AP reporting in 2009 that President Trump's successor went to Kuwait and signed campaign paraphernalia. When AP reported that, they didn't criticize President Obama for signing
his predecessor.
Yes.
Yeah. Barack Obama, right.
Exactly.
You know, in my view, every presidential visit with troops is in some way political because you're showing the flag, you're getting good video of as commander-in-chief. When George Bush landed on the aircraft carrier, mission accomplished. That didn't turn out so well in terms of that banner. But so Beverly, the president tweeted about this, and he went after CNN. He tweeted, CNN and others within the fake news universe, there's that term, were going wild over my signing MAGA hats for our military. We brought or gave no hats, as the fake news first reported. Well, actually, CNN questioned whether the troops were violating military rules against partisanship by bringing the hats. Didn't say the White House had supplied the hats, but Is this media nitpicking?
I think so. And when you look at the facts of it, it looks like these soldiers just wanted to bring this on their own. They wanted to have this signed by the president. It's actually putting the soldiers in a bad light, in my opinion, to do this. But I wish the president wouldn't even tweet about it. So there are times when the president does come out and say, OK, I'm going to call this fake news. I'm going to call this out. I actually think this story alone showed the bias in it, and he didn't need to say anything. So I find times when he does speak up, I actually think it's more negative for him than letting people just see through it themselves.
He may not need to say anything, but he does not restrain himself when he comes to what he sees as unfair coverage. Or a soundbite for you, Richard, which is mentioned. We saw some clips at the top about the president was asked by a reporter about the experience. So you have to take evasive measures when you land at night, about that experience and how he felt about it. Let's watch.
If you would have seen what we had to go through with the darkened plane, with all windows closed, with no lights on whatsoever, anywhere. Pitch black, I've never seen it. So did I have a concern? Yeah, I had a concern. But my bigger concern was maybe the people that were with me.
So he could have given a PC answer and said, I wasn't worried at all. And I thought he'd give a pretty candid answer, which is a harrowing thing to do.
I think he did give a pretty candid answer, but every president who's visited a war zone has dealt with the same type of security
Right, but he was asked the question. He was
and I think this is, as the president focuses on finally visiting the troops in Iraq, I think there's a larger story here, is that the fact that while that's happening right here at home, our Coast Guard, which are also our troops, aren't being paid by the government shutdown. So this president has to be very careful about how he deals with the politics of going to visit the troops and how the media covers it. And I think that's the story that the media is missing.
Which leads me very nicely to the shutdown. And it's now going to continue until early January when the Democrats take over the House. The president on Twitter threatened to shut down the southern border. I assume that's a negotiating tactic. But isn't it easier for the media to blame President Trump for this shutdown because he uttered the words to Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, I'll proudly shut it down for border security?
Well, every shutdown story we're reading is trying to assess blame to one side or the other. But in any shutdown situation, you need two parties to tango. And if you want to have fair and balanced reporting, you're going to understand that both sides have to compromise. So each side has something that they want, and they're going to have to come together to compromise on this. And the story should reflect that instead of trying to blame either side. And both sides are doing this.
Well, I've seen even conservative commentators, Beverly, say that the president does own this shutdown because of that meeting where he said these words on camera. But it is also true that the White House has come down on the wall funding demand from $5 billion to $2.5 billion. Democrats aren't moving. So aren't the Democrats also playing to their base, which is they feel like they can show up the president on this issue that is so important to him? And is that getting an adequate amount of attention from the press?
I think so. And I think Democrats definitely want to speak to their base. But the part about this that I think we're forgetting is when it comes to the shutdown and the way it's reported, we are talking about a shutdown based on the main campaign promise that this president had. Shutdowns in the past are often over funding, specific detail issues and budgeting, which often gets lost in the reporting.
Well, you're right. But it's not a lot of money. I mean, it's a rounding error in the total budget. But you're saying that this is something the president promised to do. And therefore, you're saying that
for him to own it's a good thing because this is what he promised. So I think it plays in his favor.
Well, it might be a good thing, but I think there will be a growing public backlash, Richard. It's kind of weird. I think the media coverage and reaction to this shutdown has been kind of muted, maybe because most of the country is on vacation between Christmas and New Year's. Only a quarter of the government is actually shut down because of previous bills passed by Congress. But now I'm starting to see, I think we'll see more stories about the 800,000 federal workers who are temporarily being denied paychecks, and they're worried about how to pay the rent or the mortgage.
I think not only the 800,000 workers that are being denied paycheck, but the federal contractors who will not get paid at all during this shutdown, number one. And number two, I think Beverly is right. It is a campaign promise. I think conservatives have forgot the second half of that promise. Remember, there was a wall, but Mexico was going to pay for it. And now we are literally having a debate about how the American taxpayer is going to pay for this wall. And I think that is where the president is in a lot of trouble. He doesn't know how to get himself out of that.
All of a sudden, Democrats seem concerned about how much money we spend. That's some of the hypocrisy. But Republicans are also.
We don't seem concerned about how much money we're going to spend. We're concerned because the president made a promise to the American people that Mexico would pay for this wall, and we're still waiting for the check from Mexico.
I think
finish your point. You said Democrats, and then you said also Republicans.
Republicans also spend far too much money. That's the other part of this. It seems a bit hypocritical. However, one thing that Republicans and Democrats have agreed on in the past, I wish this was reported more, is that all of them do tend to agree with border security. We disagree on what comprehensive immigration reform should look like,
Right.
but we agree on border security. And so I think if Democrats double down on this too much, if the media harps on this too much, I think there are a lot of independents out there see the caravan, see some of the coverage, and they have concerns.
Yeah, well, the issue is not going away, and the coverage of the shutdown, I think, will actually intensify next week.